welcome back, YouTube watchers. This is kind of a second installment to my last video where I was talking about getting a contractor's attention with money and how it surrounds lien waivers. And I started to get into topics that were going to extend well beyond the topic that I was planning on talking about. Sometimes I do that, I'll get off course. And I didn't want to get off track and encapsulate it into a singular video. So this video I want to talk about lien releases or lien waivers and process when it comes to all the parties concerned in the process. And all this information should be wrapped up in your contract. So it's important to include lien release documents or lien waivers in your contract so that the contractor and subcontractors understand what they need to sign from a procedural perspective for receiving payment on a project. And this is only one of the components that really goes into either a draw request or invoicing through the process. So should the customer require a full lien release process from top to bottom, the first thing is to make sure that you've got a contract that defines all of this. The contract should also define payment terms and lien release terminology and documentation. When we get to payment or invoicing on the job, generally speaking, the general contractor or prime contractor has an outlined payment term condition in their contract. So what will happen is the owner or the customer will have in there when they want to receive their billing. And I'm going to try and keep the dates simple here. So we would say that if I'm on the owner side, I want to be in receipt of the general contractor's invoicing no later than the 20th of every month. So we can draw that line in the sand. So if you want to get paid this month, I need to have your paperwork on or before the 20th of every month. And that billing should be for work up until that point. If we back that up now, if I'm the general contractor and I'm assembling my package for billing, I need to get all of my paperwork in from my subcontractors. So what I'm going to do is in my contract with the subs, I'm going to provide a deadline that's ahead of the 20th so that I have enough time to receive that paperwork and actually qualify the invoice and the documents coming with it so that I can put together a package that's correct. Should you submit the proper paperwork, then that window, I don't have to get back to you or make any changes to that or ask for modifications. Sometimes you'll also find that subcontractors can be a little bit delinquent in billing. You look at today's economy and how busy contractors are. I've found in the past, in times like this where everybody's really busy, sometimes your smaller contractors that individuals in the office wear many hats don't have time to send bills out. Obviously that's bad business practice because you want to make sure that you're receiving funding to pay your crews and pay your vendors. So it's important to get those invoices out. But I have found myself calling subs and asking for them to bill because I need to include their invoice in this month's draw. So what will make the math simple to say, okay, each subcontractor and vendor needs to provide an invoice to me by the 10th of the month. And when they submit that invoice on the 10th, then I can collect all those and put together my rolled up invoice to the customer by the 20th. Once that paperwork's received by the customer on the 20th, they still have their things to do. So if you're a project manager on the owner side, you're going to review those documents, make sure that they're correct. And we're going to go ahead and assume that this is a finance project because this is where that next layer becomes important. So now there's a lender involved, and the lender has inherent interest in the property and any liens that can happen on the property, as well as how much money is let out for product that's been installed. They are not going to want to pay for things that haven't been done. I'm the project manager on the owner side now. I have to submit that documentation to the lender. The lender reviews the paperwork and has either an in-house or an independent inspector that represents them that will now go out and visit my location that I've been working on. And that that lender's inspector will then either approve or deny that draw request based on the work that they see being installed. So they're going to reserve a period of time. The owner may reserve up to 10 days, sometimes 2 weeks, to do that. Again, making the math easy, let's say it's a 10-day process. So they receive the paperwork on the 10th, they work with the lender, and by the 30th now, they've verified that billing. And we'll go under the assumption that everything checks out. They can now cut a check or satisfy that draw. That money then goes to the customer. That customer now can turn around and make payment to the general contractor. Once that payment's been received by the general contractor, then they can make payment to the subcontractor. So let's say that takes a period of several days, could be 5 to 10 days by the time the subcontractor or vendor receives their funding. At that point, now you're at a 30-day billing cycle with them, and you've satisfied the requirement of their invoice. At this point, we're at day 10 of the next month, and that process repeats itself. What should be included in that draw? So not just the invoice, so invoice subcontractor, invoice general contractor, draw from customer to lender, will be all of the lien paperwork. And this is where it's important to make sure that you've got all your boxes checked. So if this is your first month on the job, you send in your first bill as a subcontractor, you're going to be required to put in a conditional partial lien release or lien waiver. You're going to waive a portion of your lien rights. Those lien rights will be associated with the dollars that you're billing. The dollars that you're billing should be in direct relationship to the work that's been performed or will be performed by the time the lender's inspector sets foot on the job site. I would say that if we're on a 10, 20, 30 day cycle here, that you should, if you're going to forecast work, forecast it no more than that 20th day of the month, because this is where we run into risks of the owner and the lender's inspector identifying what's happening at the point that they receive the invoice. So bill number one or invoice number one includes a partial conditional lien release, which means the lien waiver is not valid until they receive payment. So the condition is money. Your bill goes through, it goes full circle through the process. You receive your payment on the 10th of the following month. You have another invoice that's due. So now you submit invoice number 2. Invoice number 2 now has a conditional lien release for this last 30 days worth of work. Okay, that goes in. Should your customer or the owner of the project be savvy enough, they will also request an unconditional lien release for last month's work. This is assumed that you've now received your payment. Do not sign this paper if you have not received your money. So the billing cycle, this is important so that the general contractor gets payment out to the sub before they submit their next set of paperwork for invoicing. So now we have the invoice for this month's worth of work. We have a conditional lien release for this month's worth of work. And we have an unconditional lien release for last month's work. This all comes through as a packet. It gets sorted through by the general contractor, gets passed up to the customer, and the process repeats itself until you complete your work. On your last billing, you will, in your last invoice, you will receive a final payment on the job. When final payment is being sent out, you will have a final conditional lien release for your last invoice, meaning you still have the condition of payment. It will be accompanied by the last month's invoice dollar amount for a unconditional lien release partial for last month's billing. Assuming everything rolls through, now you receive payment the following month, and you still have to follow up with one more document, which would be your final unconditional lien release for that last payment, releasing all lien rights to the project. So it's a process that we go through. It's boxes that we have to check. Each subcontractor is responsible for their invoice. The general contractor is responsible for their invoice and the invoices of all their subs and vendors. The owner collects all of that and obviously vets that and has the lender involved in vetting that as well. So when we end up, we've got partials for every billing that we go through, and then we finish that up with a final. Conditional comes first, unconditional comes second. Again, do not sign an unconditional lien release without cash in hand. If you have not been paid, don't sign the document. It is a legally binding document. If you sign without payment, you're putting yourself at risk for trying to recover those funds. I hope this makes sense. It is a process. Again, it revolves, and it's important because what does it all tie into? It ties into getting paid and receiving payment. Subcontractors and vendors, please understand that your general contractor is depending upon you to get your paperwork in properly and timely and complete so that they can receive payment to make payment to you. There is nothing worse than having an invoice rejected as a result of paperwork that's either missing, incomplete, or incorrect. Meaning incorrect is generally either they have the wrong information or the dollar values don't align invoice to lien waiver. Seems like a lot. Probably going to have to re-listen to this one a couple times to get the gist of it, but I'm driving home the importance of procedure when it comes to lien releases and how important it is to receiving payment for everyone involved. Again, hope this helps. Driving it home, and we'll see you next trip.